Time to light the match for the Burning Truth with Casey Hendrickson.
And good afternoon. Thank you for tuning into The Burning Truth. I am your host, Casey Hendrickson. Do want to thank R&B Car Company, locations in South Bend, Warsaw, and Fort Wayne. Go to rbcarcompany.com. Friendly reminder that you can watch the show on Rumble, rumble.com/Casey the host. Again, hit the subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button. Would really appreciate it. Rumble channel's been growing very, very well. I do appreciate that. I was going to try and upload the commercial-free versions of the show to Locals, but Locals, basically, I'm 10 supporters, not followers, but supporters short of being able to have plenty of room to even do that on a regular basis. So, unfortunately, that can't happen just yet. So you're going to have to deal with the exclusive content, stuff like that on there, as opposed to the commercial-free programs. But we'll work another way around that. We'll figure something out. All right, I want to just start brief little mention, the Hunter Biden situation, the closing arguments happened. So, that's all still taking place. I think last I checked, they were still talking, but Hunter Biden has declined to testify. It's been a very, very quick trial. Legal experts have made it very clear the evidence is overwhelming. That doesn't mean anything. We have clearly learned that it doesn't matter what the evidence is. It doesn't matter if the charges are legitimate. It doesn't matter at all. This is, who knows where this is going to go. All right. He should be convicted of it. Joe Biden has promised not to give him a presidential pardon if he is, but I don't know that it's actually going to happen. So we'll keep following you on that as the jury starts to make their decision. I want to read you something. I'm going to butcher some names. I do apologize. I'll do the best that I can. Over the weekend, in a heroic operation that will yet be talked about, the state of Israel returned home 4 of its hostages: Noah Argamani, Almog Mir, Andrei Kozolov, Shlomi Ziv. Welcome back home. Congratulations to the Chief of Staff in the IDF, the Director of the ISA, and the ISA agents, and the Police Inspector General, and the offices of the Special Anti-Terrorism Unit. Our heroic fighters stormed into live fire, united as one, eliminated the terrorists, and freed the hostages. Last Thursday evening, when I gave final approval to this complex and dangerous operation, I had 2 main considerations. First, our main commitment to return home all of the hostages. Second, the knowledge that it is possible to rely on our fighters who are without peer in the world. The great achievement yesterday reflects the stature of the people, and I must say, it reflects the stature of the supporters of Israel around the entire world. However, it also entailed great sadness, the loss of a hero of Israel, Special Anti-Terrorism Unit fighter, Chief Inspector Arnon Zamora, of blessed memory. Amir Ofer was under the command of my brother Yoni, of blessed memory, who fell in the operation to free the hostages of Entebbe in 1976. Amir was the first fighter to burst into the passenger terminal where the hostages were being held. Here is what he wrote yesterday about Arnon. Several years ago, I was at a performance. An amazing young man approached me and said that he was an officer in the Special Anti-Terrorism Unit. He asked me to come to the unit and lecture on Entebbe. Of course, I agreed. On October 16th, Amir writes, only a few days after the battles to block the enemy in the western Negev, I received a phone call from Arnon. I must talk to you, he told me. This was Arnon's first furlough from the fighting in Gaza since the start of the war. We spoke for 2 hours. He told me in great detail how he and his friends were in an encounter at a junction, how 3 RPGs missed them by millimeters, how his intention to stop several kilometers before the injunction and gear up saved the entire force, how they fought like lions, how they emptied all of their clips 4 times on the first day and went from the junction to Surat, and from Surat to Ofakim, I guess is how you say that, Ofakim, and from there to Bereri. And they were on the forefront everywhere. Arnon told me how his heart broke. He constantly asked me how you succeeded, and we did not. I saw before me a true hero, an exceptional and moral person. I went home. I thought about Arnon's story and I wrote him. It took me several hours to digest your story. You were real heroes, and your performance under the most difficult conditions was extraordinary in strategic surprise, in tactical surprise, in combat, and in an area full of civilians, and in being few against many. You saved the country, Amir wrote to Arnon. Your place in heaven is already assured, and more. Ministers of the government. It goes on to talk about Chief Inspector Arnon Zamora showed exceptional heroism. Yesterday, on the eve of giving of the Torah, he again showed a supreme heroism, gave his life to save members of his people. Arnon will always be remembered in the chronicles of our people, similar to the Rabin government support for the proposal to name the operation to free the hostages at Entebbe, Operation Yonatan, after the commander of the assault forces who fell in battle. I am certain that the government will unanimously support the proposal to name the operation to free the hostages in Gaza, Operation Arnon, after the commander of the assault force who fell in battle, hero of Israel, Arnon Zamora. Happy is the people that is blessed with its heroes. We will continue together with our utmost to return all of the hostages and to achieve victory over our enemies. That is the statement that the Western media should probably be reading to you when they talk about what happened in Gaza over the weekend. That's not at all what's happening. The American government is not celebrating the heroes of the IDF for rescuing the hostages. The American government, frankly, is not even celebrating the hostages being rescued. The American news media, the Western news media, not doing that either. In fact, they're all criticizing the Israeli Defense Forces. And if you look at the video, by the way, on the ground over there, you don't see a lot of civilians, frankly. You see a lot of terrorists and sympathizers. That's what you see. And that's not what the Western media is telling you. You can see the footage. You can see the footage of the battle taken by the terrorists, taken by people who are around there, taken by the IDF. It's pretty clear there were not a lot of innocent people around. Pretty clear. That doesn't stop, brain dead idiots like Kamala Harris mourning the innocent lives lost in the Israeli hostage rescue in Gaza. That's what she said in Michigan. Before I begin, I just say a few words about the mourning, which I know weighs heavily on all of our hearts. On October 7th, Hamas committed a brutal massacre of 1,200 innocent people and abducted 250 hostages. Thankfully, 4 of those hostages were reunited with their families tonight, and we mourn all of the innocent lives that have been lost in Gaza, including those tragically killed today. There's no evidence of innocent people being killed in this hostage rescue. So why would she say that? One of the fathers of a freed Israeli hostage, when the IDF went to his house to inform him that his son had been freed, his body was found dead. Yossi Mir Jan, 57 years old, the father of freed Israeli hostage Almog Mir Jan, 21, died just hours before his son was rescued by the Israeli Defense Forces on Saturday. According to his family, the cause of death was a broken heart after 8 months of his son's captivity. I don't know the medical reasons behind it, but they went to his house literally to tell him that his son had been rescued, and they found his body just hours before. Now, the press reactions to this is really what's kind of sickening. And we've also learned some other things that probably should be mentioned when we talk about this, because, see, this is the thing. Like, there is a definitive storyline here beyond just the hostages have been rescued in a very daring hostage rescue operation by the Israeli military forces. There's a whole other angle, including one that paints at least one news agency in a very, very bad light. And that story is not being covered at all in the West, particularly in the United States. We'll cover it here next on The Burning Truth. And good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in to The Burning Truth. I'm your host, Casey Hendrickson. All right, so we're talking a little bit about what happened with the Israeli Defense Forces today. Well, not today, but we're talking about it today, but it happened over the weekend. Rescued 4 hostages. And listen, I celebrate the fact that there are still hostages who are alive. One of the hostages was a young woman who went viral because they split her up from her male companion. They put her on the back of a motorcycle and they drove away with her. We haven't heard the details from a lot of the hostages about what they've endured, but I'm sure that in the coming years we will. We've heard some. Some issues that I have is how this is being covered. This is obviously a very daring operation. The IDF released the footage of it. There's other footage from the ground where you can clearly see that they were surrounded by hostiles, not civilians. And the American press has in particular been really disgusting with this. There's a soundbite that's floating around. It's been played on a couple of shows already of a, I think it was a BBC, don't quote me on that, asking one of the Israeli officials, like, why didn't you warn everybody before you launched this operation? Because the IDF is the only military on the planet who actually warns the people that they're about to bomb. Like, hey, you should probably get out. We're going to blow this building up because Hamas uses it. And just the naive stupidity of even asking that question. Why didn't you let the terrorists know that you were coming to their building to rescue the hostages that they were keeping? Why didn't you tell them in advance that you were going to do that? What a stupid question. What an absolutely stupid question. So the Washington Post, more than 200 Palestinians killed in Israeli hostage raid in Gaza. A brazen daytime raid freed 4 Israeli hostages, but unleashed relentless bombardments of the refugee camp in central Gaza. Well, we've heard this one before, where they've claimed that they bombed a refugee camp and then they didn't bomb a refugee camp. They claimed that they bombed a hospital and they didn't bomb a hospital. Israel rescues hostages in deadly raid. BBC. Oh, yeah, it was the BBC. Shouldn't the IDF have warned Palestinians before launching the rescue? Yeah, that was actually a BBC thing. The soundbite is 5.5 minutes, though. I'm not going to play the whole thing. But the reporter basically said, Jonathan, there is concern about the death toll among Palestinians. Do you think Israeli forces anticipated the level of casualties incurred? He responded by saying, yeah, I think the whole civilian issue here needs to be analyzed impartially and understood. According to the reports that I have gotten, and also to the testimonies and even statements made by Hamas spokesperson, the Israeli hostages were held and jailed by Palestinian civilians in a Palestinian civilian area. And as regrettable as any loss of life is, I think that we would have to investigate really who were the people who jailed these Israeli civilians for 8 months. Why did they do it? What was the role of the surrounding community and the hundreds, if not thousands of Palestinians who for sure were aware of the fact that the Israeli hostages were being held in their midst, and why were they complicit with Hamas? And again, this is not a difficult thing, ladies and gentlemen. If you're going to be in Gaza and you're going to support Hamas, as far as I'm concerned, you are at least terrorist adjacent and you are an oxygen thief. Your continued existence on this planet is irrelevant. Jonathan, we don't know that they were necessarily complicit with Hamas. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. All of the casualties that were incurred, allegedly, there were reports of women and children, again, all coming from Hamas. It is appearing to be high civilian death toll, again, all coming from Hamas. Would there have been a warning to those civilians for them to get out on time? For sure, of course, we cannot anticipate Israel to be warning ahead of a raid to extract or to save hostages, because then what the terrorists would do is kill the hostages and they would defeat the purpose. So, of course, we cannot expect that. Also known as duh. Now here's where things get really uncomfortable. And this is where the news media really needs to start covering this story properly. Because this is not the only time this has happened. I have been in this business nearly 2 decades, and it has been the story since before I was in this business. All 3 rescued male Israeli hostages were held by a Gazan journalist. Now, do you think that the news media wants to report that, hey, one of the people that we rely on to give us information about this was actually complicit in keeping these hostages? Do you think the news media in the West wants to be able to say that? It was confirmed on Sunday that all three of the male hostages rescued on Saturday were held by Abdullah al-Jamal, a journalist who contributed to the Palestine Chronicle and to Al Jazeera. Interesting stuff, don't you think? So the hostages were rescued in a joint operation by the IDF and the ISA, as well as the Israeli police. You got one Israeli casualty. That's Arnon Zamora, which we talked about earlier. Al-Jamal and his wife and father were reportedly killed in the Israeli raid after soldiers entered his home. And I'm sure that if this story ever gets covered, it's going to be the IDF murdered a journalist, ignoring the fact that he had three hostages who were being held in his house. It's like when they ran around telling you, oh, Jamal Khashoggi was murdered by the Saudi prince. Jamal Khashoggi was a spy and was orchestrating a coup. Jamal Khashoggi wasn't a Washington Post journalist. He'd written an op-ed or two, but he was a spy who was facilitating a coup against the Saudi royal family. What do you expect to happen? So you've got these hostages being held in a journalist's home. Now, something else. Palestinian civilians were paid by Hamas to hold the Israeli hostages in their homes. So you've got a journalist who was holding three of the four hostages. You've got the other civilians were being paid by Hamas to house them. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, BBC, Washington Post, anybody else, as far as I'm concerned, those are fair targets for the IDF to take out. If you're going to participate and you're going to aid a terrorist organization in kidnapping people and holding them hostage, and you're going to accept monetary compensation for doing so, as far as I'm concerned, good riddance if they kill you. Got more coming up. You're tuned in to The Burning Truth.
The Burning Truth with Casey Hendrickson.
One hour from now, Micah Beckwith is going to be joining us. He's running for lieutenant governor. And this honestly could be one of the more unusual races in the state. I told you this is going to be a very interesting election season. There's no doubt about that. Michael Beckwith is seen by many as a potential victor in the lieutenant governor race, potentially beating out Mike Braun's selected candidate in Julie McGuire. So it's interesting to kind of watch this develop. So we'll have him on about 4:30 Eastern time, for those of you in the Eastern time zone, which is most of you. But stay tuned for that. I think it's going to be an interesting interview, no doubt about that. All right, let's talk about what happened in Europe. Europe has also been interesting. It's not just what happened in Israel, but Europe has been France, folks. There is a decidedly right bent that is happening in Europe. More and more left-wing regimes are losing elections throughout Europe. And they have for some time. Now, France has been a big holdout. And Macron, they're calling it a humiliating defeat for Macron. And Emmanuel Macron, who I'm no fan of, but Emmanuel Macron has become the leader of the Western world because, well, Joe Biden isn't. And Emmanuel Macron, for all of his faults, is at least trying desperately, much to the chagrin of pretty much everybody, but he's trying. He's a busybody. He's trying to do stuff that I disagree with quite frequently, but in particular, when talking about trying to get peace in Ukraine and that sort of thing. But now he's also turned because he can't get peace in Ukraine. He's decided to go ahead and kind of go to this whole, we need American troops and NATO troops now, and which is not a great idea. And that could be one of the reasons that he lost. Following an historic loss to Marine Le Pen's right-wing party in European elections on Sunday, French President Emmanuel Macron said that he is dissolving the French parliament. Macron said France will hold new elections on June 30th and July 7th. A high-stakes maneuver that the Wall Street Journal said stunned the nation after projections based on early ballot counts came in for Sunday's election for the European Parliament. The projection showed National Rally garnering around 31% of the vote, twice the support for Macron's Renew party. Youch. Last I checked, and I could be wrong, last I checked, because people with far less experience than me claim that I don't know what I'm talking about. But last I checked, Morgan, back me up here, having somebody double your support is generally not good for you. Yeah, she thinks that that's correct. Okie dokie. We're going to run with Morgan's opinion here since mine is apparently not experienced enough. This is a serious, weighty decision, but above all, it's an act of trust, Macron said. Confidence in you, confidence in the ability of the French people to make the right choice for themselves and for future generations. National Rally leader Jordan Bardella said Sunday's results marked an unprecedented rout for the powers that be, adding that it was day one of the post-Macron era. Macron's decision to call parliamentary elections opens the door for his party, which is deeply unpopular at the moment, to shed even more seats to rival parties in France's National Assembly, the country's lower house in parliament. If that occurs, Macron could be forced to appoint a prime minister from another party, such as the center-right Les Républicains. I'm butchering that. In a power-sharing arrangement, which in France is known as cohabitation. A dissolution means a cohabitation, said Alain Duhamel, a prominent political analyst in France. The shocking news in France comes after Europe's right-wing parties put on a show of strength in this weekend's European Union elections, which also reinforced German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's position, lagging two rival parties. Sunday's results still appeared to leave the mainstream pro-EU parties with a lock on power in Brussels, if only for the time being. The center-right EU political grouping that now leads the bloc looked set to win the most seats in the European Parliament, boosting European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's hopes of keeping her job for a second term. She has forged a close working relationship with the Biden administration. Of course she has. Still, France's far-right opposition party, National Rally, looked set to be among the pan-European election biggest winners. Marine Le Pen's party is on target to become the largest single party in the European Parliament. Of course, if you don't remember, Marine Le Pen was very, very popular outside of France. She's popular in France as well, but she's kind of like, and I hate using this just because it's not accurate, but you just don't have any other reference to draw from, but she's kind of like a Trump in France. And by that, I just mean she's flamboyant, she's very popular, she's a populist. People show up to her rallies, they don't show up to Macron's, that sort of thing. So Marine Le Pen was popular in the United States. There's a lot of Americans who were following Marine Le Pen and saying, hey, we kind of like this lady. And it looks like her party is doing very, very well, not just in France, but also in the European Union. Projections based on early ballot counts on Sunday evening suggested National Rally had gained roughly 31% of the vote, twice the support for Macron's Renew party. After the French results, Macron announced that he was dissolving parliament to call fresh elections. His party already lacked a majority in the National Assembly, and the first round of elections will take place on June 30th, followed by a second round of elections on July 7th. Okay. Now, France does something very different than the United States. France secures their elections. So when there's a French election, there's rarely any serious contesting of that election. They don't let you mail in your ballots. Everybody has voter ID. Everybody has to prove that they are eligible and legally allowed to vote. They secure their elections. So it's a bit different than when you hear about an election being called in Canada, where it's like, all right, something funny might happen to keep Trudeau in power or what have you. If the tide is turning in France, the tide could very well just turn in France. And there isn't really a mechanism that makes it easy to steal an election in France or to rig it or manipulate it in any way, shape, or form like there is in most of the rest of the world, including here. So if it's going to happen, it is certainly possible that France is going to flip a little bit more towards a conservative bet. Now, keep in mind, a conservative in Europe is not exactly the same as here. We're aligned with them, but it's not exactly the same. So we'll always have disagreements with them on stuff, but it's going to not be a far left socialist type government. Now, with the European Parliament vote, the exit polls from Germany are already in, and they are a disaster for both the alliance of French Macron, and who was steamrolled by Marine Le Pen, and for the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Social Democrats, which crashed to their worst ever results in the European parliamentary elections on Sunday, as conservative and right-wing parties soared across the old continent, a result which will help tilt the European Parliament further towards a more anti-immigration, anti-green stance, more border security, that sort of thing. Now, in the European Union, the lefties still have control, but they're losing seats. And so they still have that control, but they're going to have to negotiate a little bit more. There's going to be more maneuvering that are going to have to happen. And if they don't get their act together, of course, they face the prospect of, in the future, losing more seats and maybe actually flipping the European Union altogether. So there is a definitive turn to the right in Europe right now, not just in individual countries, but also in the European Union, which we have to pay very, very close attention to. Joe Biden's allies are losing. Trump's allies are winning. We got more coming up. You're tuned into The Burning Truth. Okay, you got to help me out with something, ladies and gentlemen. Hop onto the live stream. I got a couple of people who are trying to convince me. I am debating getting like a nice griddle, like a Blackstone or something like that. Somebody hopped on there and said Pit Boss has got a flat top as well. I'm trying to talk myself out of it because I'm like, will you use it? Yeah, I'll use it. Will you use it as much as you think you will? Probably not. Will it just sit there and collect dust? No. Is it worth it, though? Maybe. So I'll tell you what. You guys, you help me out. And let me know on the live stream on rumble.com/CaseyThost. What do you think? Should I get like a Blackstone or some kind of a flat top, a griddle or something like that? You let me know. I am debating it. I would have to save for it, obviously, but I am debating it. It is a possibility. I do really love my smoker. We're talking about the smoker here with a producer. So, and she has one as well. But you haven't used yours yet, right? Okay, you got to use it. Just start small. Just like grab a couple of steaks or something like that. Just start small. Trust me, you're going to enjoy it. Once you start with a good pellet smoker, like you don't stop. Pellet smokers are just the easiest ones. There's other smokers that are obviously, I would argue, superior for flavor, but a good pellet smoker will get the job done just fine. All right. Lime scooters. Now, a lot of my audience is going to remember Lime scooters. Some of you may not, don't know. But Lime scooters have a technology built into them that we could have really used when they were in this area around the St. Joseph River. Now, if you're not familiar with Lime scooters, these are the rental scooters. Now, Pete Buttigieg, back when he was mayor of the city of South Bend, launched Lime electric scooters in the middle of a blizzard. I kid you not. Ladies and gentlemen, that is your current transportation secretary. Just so you know. The very first day that they were live, there was snow and ice on the ground. So Lime scooters, the little electric scooters and whatnot that you pay to ride around, kind of like the Lime bikes, but if you didn't want to ride a bike, you just wanted a scooter. Well, they would frequently end up in Michigan. At the time, I lived in Michigan, and you would drive from Michigan to Indiana, and you would see Lime bikes and Lime scooters all over in Michigan where they didn't have Lime bikes and they didn't have Lime scooters. They only had them on the Indiana side of the border, but they were always in Michigan. And when they weren't in Michigan, they were in the river. They would throw them in the river. Last I checked, throwing an electric scooter into the river is not great for the habitat, but I digress. So anyway, we could have used technology, and we may have referenced it on the show once or twice about, hey, maybe like you shouldn't allow this thing to go all the way across state lines. Like maybe you should have some kind of a kill switch with GPS so that way you would prevent the scooter from, going into the river or going into another state or something like that. And we were never really given a definitive answer about any of that. Well, guess what? Apparently Lime was listening, and Lime has developed this no-go zone technology where they can literally shut off the Lime scooters for certain areas of any town that they are operating in. Now, that seems interesting. Now, some of you are like, yeah, but Lime kind of pulled out here, Casey. So what's the big deal? At least in most of the areas. I think some of you listening right now still have Lime scooters and bikes, but Lime pulled out. So why are you mentioning this now? Well, that's a very good point, because you see in Spokane, Washington, they keep painting this Pride crosswalk, and people keep, putting tire marks on it by driving over it. Now, again, seems pretty relevant that if you don't want tire marks on your Pride symbol, you don't paint it on a street where people drive over it, but that's just me. Well, some kids, yes, there's the whole car thing and all of that stuff, but there's some kids who grabbed the Lime scooter. We told you about this when it happened last week. They grabbed a Lime scooter, and the kids were literally putting tire marks on the Pride symbol, which looks like it's the trans flag, they were doing this on the road. They were putting tire marks from the Lime scooter on the road. So Lime said, you know what we can do? We can just shut it down to where the scooter will not operate on this graphic that is painted on the street. Folks, they can shut down the scooter in the exact location of the Pride display on the ground. Now, they never did that when they were here. They never developed that technology to be able to shut it down. While discussion surrounding the incident continues to rage on, that's because the kids decided to go ahead and do the tire marks on the thing. The scooter rental company at the center of the alleged acts of vandalism has now issued a statement. All of us at Lime condemn these vile acts in no uncertain terms. That's the Lime Director of Government Relations, Hayden Harvey, told the National Desk. At a time when our teams at Lime are beginning Pride celebrations around the globe, it is disturbing to see the hate taking place in Spokane. It's not hate. People are sick and tired of having this stuff shoved down their throat. That's all it is. Lime has now implemented a no-go zone over the crosswalk, meaning scooters driven over the mural will be remotely shut down, according to the company's website. Well, isn't that a nice little turn of events? And you can thank a couple of teenagers who are a little rambunctious for it. All right, folks, we got more coming up. You're tuned in to The Burning Truth. Don't forget, at Casey the Host online.
Podcasts by Federated Media.